everybody, and welcome to my channel. I am criscrosaplesos, and I'm going to go ahead and run down real quickly everything that I have done to make this build viable in both endgame bossing, which is all the one-shots you saw in the intro, as well as the clearing gear that I swapped to in order to be able to do Nightmare Dungeons and Zir. First off, I want to let you know that there are two things that really make this build work. And one of them is obviously the specialization being combo points. You cannot change this. This is a absolute must for this build. But the other one is going to be Tybalt's Will. Now this is optional. You can still one-shot all of the endgame without it, but since there is a bug with it right now giving you extra combo points, it is definitely a fun addition to have to really make those damage numbers escalate higher and higher. So since this is a seasonal character, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the Vampiric powers. These are absolutely necessary to have at least 4 out of the 5 of these all the time. If not, you're going to have a real difficult time with survivability even after swapping out of your boss killing gear. This right here, Undying, is going to be basically your lifeline. This is going to keep you alive. If you increase your attack speed to as high as you can while you're clearing, it's very easy for you to pop a potion or just sit there and attack with Puncture to get your health back up very quickly. Absolutely necessary to keep yourself alive. 10 out of 10, highly recommend. Sanguine Brace is going to be very good all around. First of all, because rogues don't always have the ability to have Fortifying. And this also increases our critical strike chance, which is all around a great thing to have. Remember that Fortify gives you a base 10% damage reduction, which is going to stack on top of all of the other damage reduction we're rolling on our gear to make this a decent build to clear things with. Metamorphosis is absolutely necessary for this build. The Unstoppable is incredible to have. You are going to be attacking, rapid firing, and evading so often that you are always going to have that Unstoppable up. And if you have Tybalt's, you're always going to be proccing your damage bonus from that. You have basically 8 seconds, and if you can proc that Unstoppable again within 8 seconds, you restart the timer, and you are constantly going to have that up. If you don't have Tybalt's, it's still a very good Vampiric power to have just for maneuverability, because we are pairing it with boots that have the attacks reduce evades cooldown by 1.2 seconds. That means that we'll be able to attack 3 times, and our evade will come back. And if our attack speed is super high, then we basically can be constantly moving around and attacking at the same time, which is huge for our survivability and our ability to actually complete high-tier Nightmare Dungeons and Zir stuff. Moving on, the last 2 Vampiric powers are all for attack speed. Vampiric power Ravenous and Moonrise both increase our attack speed. This again is going to be a wonderful pairing with Undying because it's going to help keep us alive. And those stacked along with the aspects that we have on our gear that will further increase our attack speed is going to make us very tanky in most situations if you have enough damage reduction stacked behind your self-healing from Undying. Quick note, in all the armor you're going to want Sapphires to give us a little bit more damage reduction while fortified. That's just free damage reduction all the time because we will always be fortified. But right now I'm wearing my clear gear. So I'm going to start with the helmet. You're going to want Cheats aspect if you don't have a Godslayer crown. Godslayer is going to help with a lot of crowd control and a lot of damage addition. And a nice bit of life if you can get a good roll on it. But until you get a Godslayer crown, a well-rolled helmet with some resistances, life, and total armor with Cheats on it is going to be probably the most beneficial. Next is the chest piece. But what you're going to want for your clearing gear is damage reduction from close and distant, whatever resistances you may need, and then flat damage reduction is going to be great, or dodge chance. I got a damage on here, which is okay, and then a really mid-roll of fire resistance, which is more than enough to get where I am comfortable in doing higher level stuff. And then you're going to want the aspect of Might on that, giving us a flat 20% damage reduction all the time because we are going to be attacking so ridiculously quick, rotating between 3 basic skills and rapid fire. Even if you only have the 2-second roll on this, it's going to be up all the time. Free damage reduction. If you don't have Grasp of Shadow, just a set of gloves with +2 rapid fire, attack speed, critical strike chance, stuff like that is going to be ideal. But if you can get yourself a Grasp of Shadow, even with a low roll on it, the increased dex, attack speed, and core skills is going to be very beneficial for you. Highly recommend this. It's not necessary for the build, but it is a massive, massive damage increase. For the pants, if you don't have Tybalt's Will, these are pretty much perfect for clearing and for bossing. But if you don't have those, a well-rolled Temerity is going to be really, really helpful if you're struggling with survivability. But other than that, you can throw down regular pants that have damage reduction of all kinds and dodge chance on them, and any resistances that you haven't filled out with your jewelry or your boots. If you are wearing pants, I would suggest using the Umbrous aspect. It is going to make it a lot easier to maintain at least 2 to 3, if not 5 Dark Shrouds, which is going to significantly increase your damage reduction, and your survivability overall is going to feel much, 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 much better. For the boots, all you want is movement speed as high as you can get, and then 3 resistances as high as you can get those. I got dodge chance on this, which is okay for a dex build, but I would have preferred another resistance. That way I wouldn't have had to roll fire on my chest piece and could have another defensive or offensive roll on that if I wanted. The aspect you're going to want is the aspect of Quickening Fog. As you'll see later on, we are going to be doing a lot of dashing, and as long as there is a nice smoke grenade at the end of that, anything that gets hit by the dash and by the smoke grenades is going to take a significant amount more critical strike damage from us, which is very, very important. Moving on to the jewelry, you're going to want something with disobedience and the highest roll of disobedience aspect you can on your jewelry. Again, total armor, damage reductions, and dex or intel percentages are probably going to be best in slot. I rolled a damage on here after rolling about 50 times, so I just stuck with it. Another option is to have something like this with +2 either impetus or exploit or weapon mastery, and then damage reduction and then intel would also be very, very helpful for you, as long as you don't forget to get the disobedience aspect on there, because our armor is not great. Typical for a rogue build, but that can fix that real easily. Our rings are going to be different between our clearing gear and our bossing gear. One of our rings is going to have the aspect of the expectant on it, and the other one is going to need the accelerating aspect. Both of these are aimed towards increasing our attack speed and our damage. If you are struggling with survivability, I would suggest going ahead and grabbing an Ashira's, throwing it in your other weapon slot, and then switching the aspect of the expectant off and putting the rapid fire aspect on that ring. That will increase your overall attack speed significantly, and because we are using the Vampiric power Undying, that is going to really help your survivability and help keep you alive. So keep that in mind if you're struggling. For clearing, you're going to want rings with critical strike chance, critical strike damage, maximum life, and damage to crowd controlled is going to be very helpful for you, but there are lots of other things that you can put there in its place. But because we are using close quarters keystone passive, every little bit of crowd control damage is going to increase our base damage, which is very lovely. Okay, for the weapons, our two-handed is going to be a crossbow for the vulnerable damage, which we aren't stacking any vulnerable damage, but it is better than damage to distance because we're not always going to be super distant from enemies, so it's kind of a waste of a stat line. You're going to want core skill damage. Critical strike damage is going to be a lot better, and crowd control damage, as well as a high dex roll is going to be best in slot for this. I have not gotten that, but this crossbow does more than enough for what I need it to do. So yeah, look for the rapid aspect to go on here, get as high a roll as you can, again, because that attack speed is going to be huge for our survivability. And look for a high dex roll, core skill damage, damage to crowd control, and critical strike damage. Condemnation is a pretty much must-have for this build, although you don't absolutely need it. It does stack its damage multiplicatively with the aspect of the expectant, so those two together are a huge damage boost. Highly recommend a well-rolled condemnation, but again, it is not absolutely necessary. But what is necessary is having the repeating aspect. This helps with the narrow firing lane of rapid fire to spread out a little bit and kill large groups of enemies much quicker. This is another good example of why you need to look at the build guide, because this is my old bossing weapon. That's why it has the overpower roll on it. If you could not have the overpower roll and get a critical strike damage roll, this would be a very good clearing sword. But no matter what, if you don't get the perfect rolls on there, at least try and get a dexterity and a crowd control roll on there to get your base damage output up a little bit. And this is where you're going to put your repeating aspect. You also can put it anywhere else that you want, but I just slid it here because I'm also swapping out this weapon for bossing. And you don't need the repeating aspect for bossing. It's pointless because you're only going to be hitting one target. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and get into the bossing gear. So to start off, obviously best in slot is going to be a Shaco, but until you get a Shaco, just using your old helmet from your clearing gear or using a Godslayer crown that's well rolled is going to be best in slot other than the Harlequin crest. And again, if you have cheats aspect, throw that on your helmet. It's a huge damage reduction, and because we're going to be having pretty much everybody around us crowd controlled all the time. Next, the chest piece, you're going to want to look for all damage rolls on this. Unfortunately, I got an armor roll, which is annoying, but you can get damage with ranged weapons, damage with weapons that swap to new weapons, which is huge because the last thing that we do before we do our one-shot rapid fire is dash. So that means that we are going to be weapon swapping from our daggers to our crossbows, so that's a massive, massive increase to our damage output right there. There are also a lot of other great rolls that you could have here. Anything that increases your damage is going to be beneficial. And the aspect you're going to want on here is the aspect of the Protector. This is going to guarantee that our first shot against a elite enemy is going to give us barrier for 10 seconds. That is our largest window, is that 10-second period. The gloves and the pants pretty much stay the same if you have them. Grasp of Shadow with max rolls is best in slot, and a Tybalt's Will with high rolls on it is going to be best for you. The higher you can get the maximum resource modifier on here, the better. Yeah, even if you don't have Tybalt's Will, you're still going to be demolishing everything in the endgame. I will show you more about that later. Boots are going to stay the exact same. Movement speed and 3 resistances are going to be best in slot, and you absolutely have to have the Quickening Fog aspect. This is where we get a massive damage increase from dashing into enemies and having all of them dazed for 4 seconds or whatever it is when it's leveled up. You are not going to want a bow in your two-handed weapon slot. You're going to want a crossbow. A high dex roll, critical strike damage, overpower, and core skill damage are your best in slot for this. And we're going to be using one of this season's aspects, the aspect of the elements, which we are going to have to be carefully timing out our one shot on our bosses to get that massive 60% damage increase to our rapid fire. Again, on our one-handed weapon, it's going to be pairing with a Condemnation with well-rolled things on it. But you're going to, again, look for dexterity, critical strike damage, overpower damage, and damage to crowd controlled. Core skill damage would be a much better roll on here. That goes nicely if you can actually get a marksman skill damage on your chest piece that is going to combo all together to make a nice damage increase all the time. This amulet, the Banished Lord's Talisman, is the bread and butter of your one-shotting mechanics. Getting this with a maximum 120% roll on it is going to change your life. This is absolutely necessary to be one-shotting endgame bosses. If you do not have this, it will not work. Our rings are going to be, you're going to want critical strike damage, overpower damage, vulnerable damage, damage with core skills, or damage with marksman skills, and damage to crowd control. Same with the other ring, critical strike damage, overpower damage. Damage to close is not a great thing to have on here. I've rolled this ring about 30 million times, and that's the only thing that I've gotten that is even close to beneficial for this build. As you can see, it's only an 894 ring. My jewelry is one of the toughest things that I've been trying to get without using the trade market. But at any rate, you're going to be using Edge Masters on your other ring because no matter what, you are going to be full on your essence all the time whenever you're about to hit a boss. So that's just a free, 18% or nice max roll of 20% damage increase. Okay, so that is basically the gear that you're going to want to set yourself up for one-shotting bosses and clearing high-level GRs, clearing high-level nightmare dungeons. Now I will quickly go over the mechanics of the build and how everything blends together and works well. If you would like to see the Paragon board or the skill tree, those will be linked in the description with the build guide. So first, in order to one-shot a boss, you're going to need to get your resources up past 300 spent. Now on bosses like Duriel, where you need to kill one of the 2 little maggots at the beginning, you can go up to like as close as you can to make sure that your next one after that is actually going to be your guaranteed critical overpower. So this is what we're doing. We are proccing a guaranteed overpower and a guaranteed critical strike that overpowers. That's going to deal 120% extra damage. Absolutely huge damage numbers from a rogue. But you absolutely have to have conceited. Conceited is how we are guaranteeing ourselves a critical strike, and 300 resource spent is how we are guaranteeing that that critical strike is also an overpower. So once you have 300 of your max resource, you're going to want to pay attention to this and start attacking when the moon phase is almost complete, because the star phase is the one that gives us more physical damage. So you're going to wait until this gets to the right point. You're going to attack 3 times
with puncture. This is going to do a number of different things. It's going to proc the aspect of the protector, which in turn will give us 25% more damage from the conceited aspect, but most importantly, it's going to proc the first part of our crowd control keystone passive. After that, you're going to caltrops away from the boss. This is going to give you 5% increased damage each second that the boss is within those caltrops. So you're probably going to get between 20, 25, and sometimes even 30% increased damage just by using the caltrops alone. After you caltrops, you are going to dash through the boss, but make sure that you're not dashing behind the boss. You want to land kind of inside of it or just behind it so that your smoke grenades are guaranteed to hit it. The dash itself is going to ensure that it takes 15% increased critical strike damage for the next 5 seconds. The smoke grenades are going to make it so it has a flat 25% increased damage taken from us, all because of the aspect that we have on our boots. And the most important part, this is going to proc the other attack speed bonus for close quarters combat, giving us a 134% increase to our base damage. After that, you're going to evade back towards the other side of the boss. Because of Metamorphosis, this was going to proc Unstoppable, which is also going to proc our damage boost from Tybalt's Will. And lastly, we're going to hit Concealment, which is going to put us in stealth, but also guarantee that whatever our attack is next is going to be a critical strike. And the last thing you can do is make sure that you walk at least, I think it's 12 meters at level 3 for your impetus, proccing that 15% damage increase, and then let them have it.
Okay, just to show you exactly how incredibly high you can get your damage numbers without using Tybalt's and without having the blood sigil, I'm going to swap out my Tybalt's Will for one of my other pairs of pants. I'm also going to take off my Harlequin Quest because that's a pretty significant amount of damage. I have to keep the amulet on because that's the bread and butter of this build, but I'm also going to go into my Paragon tree and swap out my blood sigil or chip instead. My attack power is significantly lower, but you're going to be surprised.
La 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 hey 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 la 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 la